Today's story is going to relate to my going to a conference yesterday with my wife. It was called Dementia Care 17, and it was basically an all-day conference where we got to hear speakers talking to us about Alzheimer's, about patients having it, about caregivers and what they need to go through or what they'll go through. And it was very intriguing for me in many ways. I learned a lot of interesting things. I met someone who is going through the exact same things that I am with her mother, and I mean exact. It was almost like we had the exact same mother and like we had grown up together. It was so strange. But in this particular instance, the first major speaker they had on the day was a lady named Jolene Blakely. And what she did was she talked about her 33 years of working with people with dementia, as well as working with her father, who ended up getting it. And I learned some different ways on how you should be doing some things. But at one point, she mentioned something that was very interesting. What she said was that when your family member happens to talk about someone who's deceased, we shouldn't tell them that they're deceased. But that's all she said at the time. So she continued talking, and then she said, "Are there any questions?" And my hand shot up. And so she sent someone over to me with a microphone, like I need a microphone. But she sent someone over, and I said, "You mentioned that we shouldn't say that someone is deceased, but you didn't say what we should do." And she says, "Oh, you're right, I didn't." And I think it was a setup in retrospect. But I asked that question. So then we went through some scenarios. And what she learned from me was that I did not have a traditional upbringing. So I really kind of threw her off a little bit, but she eventually worked her way around in helping me to understand a way how to answer that question and other questions and situations that come up. Now, here was the funny thing. The funny thing is that I became kind of an interesting celebrity for the rest of the day. Everybody knew who I was because it turned out that everybody else had the same question, because we all go through this. It's just something that happens. And most of the time we say, "Oh, well, so-and-so doesn't live anymore." And then it upsets the patient or the person. And so the way she said to do it is you try to answer it in a way where if you know something about the person who passed away, for instance, if it's a father or their mother or sister or something like that, you hopefully will know something about their background, so you can say something like, "Oh, well, they're still at work," or "They haven't come home yet from school," or whatever. And most of the time, when they're asking these questions, they're not looking at someone who they saw a couple years ago. They're thinking about someone who they knew a long time ago, probably more than 20 years ago. So if you go to that place, then you can be very helpful. Now, if you saw the title of this video where it said sometimes it's the leaders who ask the questions, I'm saying that because I've had a pattern over the years of going to conferences or presentations where I am the one who will ask the question that sometimes I know everyone else wants to know, but they're somehow afraid to ask. Every once in a while, I am clueless that anyone else has this as a question, and I just ask it because I've never been afraid to speak in front of a lot of people. I'm not afraid to ask questions. Uh, and sometimes that's what you have to do, because we recognize that if you don't ask questions to something that you don't know and no one else asks it, then when everything is over, no one has any answers, and you're left asking each other, "Well, did you notice so-and-so didn't answer this? Yeah, what do you think?" And there's nothing to say because you had an opportunity because someone was there in front of you. And this is one of those kind of things where a lot of people who end up in leadership think they're always supposed to know all the answers, but that's not true. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to learn just like everyone else. And I think that more people who are in leadership or want to be in leadership need to learn this skill. Don't ever be afraid not to know something. Ask the question or research if you have the opportunity. In this particular instance, I've got this lady in front of me. I got over 400 people in the room. Just was no researching this question, so I had to ask it. So that's what today's video is. What do you guys think? If you're a leader, are you afraid to ask questions, or are you willing to ask that question even if there's a possibility it might make you look bad? Let me know. I hope you have a great weekend, and we will see each other later.